Hey, welcome back, Rankers. Had a great webinar last week and all about content duplication, so go and check that out. If you don't know where it is, then email me. I want to talk to you this week a little bit about some of the stories that I've heard about SEO and how it should be done, and this is even just recently. And I'm talking about, and I'm not going to here to bag out other SEO companies because there's plenty of people doing that already. Just Google it. But I wanted to a couple of funny stories I've heard recently, which I thought you'd enjoy because you're an educated individual. You've been watching the show for a while. I get it. I just came from a meeting today with a client who's been with us for going on 3 years now, 2.5 years. And as she pointed out, when the relationship started, it was pretty rocky. It wasn't a lot of fun, mainly because this industry is littered with bad practice and disasters and horrible instances and experiences for clients. I get that. I know that. I've been in it long enough to have seen that. In fact, when I started doing SEO back in the early noughties, there was a handful of us. And then we had this sort of apex of SEO and glut of SEO companies probably around 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Then Penguin came out and that smashed a lot of them and they just disappeared. And then Panda came out and smashed a bunch more. Then Exact Match Domain came out and smashed a bunch of others. Anyway, one of the stories I heard from this client today, she was saying there was a question in the meeting, maybe we should go for a long tail keyword. And I always explain to staff here is just that, look, long tail's great and it's what's going to long term bring in your most traffic. But as a barometer, you should be aiming for the heights. You should be going after the big phrases. Now, this client today, 2.5 years ago, we went after a phrase which is probably it's incredibly competitive, not only from private industry but also government. So you've got a lot of players in the field. Anyway, we've been number one now for about 8 months, 9 months. But it took that long to get there. And over the last 12 months, the traffic has more than doubled from Google Organic. And it's also increased the share of the entire traffic from the site. So previously it was 52%, now it's 85%. And a lot of the reasons is that couple of phrases that were really, really difficult, really broad. I'm talking a single word, not a phrase at all, actually. They themselves aren't bringing in the traffic. However, being number one for that phrase means that we've lifted a whole bunch of other content along with it. So you do get all this long tail coming in and playing, and that's what brings in all that extra traffic. So you aim for number one for the hard things, and by doing so, you'll bring in a lot more traffic overall. So for an SEO company and another potential client I was talking to today, one of the page titles was something like Women's Apparel Fashion Online Store, because the SEO company had told them this is a good phrase. It's a long tail phrase. We know it's not women's fashion, but it's a long tail phrase, and we'll get some traffic out of that in the short term. We should go for that. Don't do that. Go for the big ones. Go for the inspirational ones. Go for the things that are too hard to go after. And I know there's some clients reading this right now, watching this right now, they're probably saying, hang on, that's not what Jim said. He said, we're ranking for this. Isn't that good? Yes, I am. But internally, we're going for big phrases. We will monitor that phrase, that keyword or that keyword phrase that makes sense to the client because that's their industry, that's their niche. It doesn't always apply to some clients. Like, for instance, you might be a lawyer. Well, we don't want to rank you for number one for lawyer. No, that's not what we want. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you're a tax lawyer, I want to be sure that everyone here internally is aiming to get you number one for tax lawyer. That's what I'm talking about. Another curious one I heard today, which I had to stop myself from laughing, seriously. But I felt sorry for the client, so I couldn't. So, big Magento site, and unnecessarily big Magento site. A catalogue of, I think it was about 6,000 SKUs, or no, 60,000 SKUs. Google's indexed nearly 500,000 pages, which is unfortunate. But the fix, one of the fixes that the SEO company was talking about doing was removing all the Google sitemaps, which they did. They removed the Google sitemaps to stop Google crawling all that stuff. Okay, there are so many reasons why that's wrong. And this is a company, this is an SEO company that's charging top dollar. I'm not talking small amounts. And their fix to stop Google crawling areas of the site that it shouldn't was to remove sitemaps from Google Webmaster Tools. That's not going to work. The reason that you have sitemaps in Google Webmaster Tools is to let Google not only know where your content is, but also the importance of the content, the context in some situations of the content. For instance, if you have content in your sitemap, but you can't get to it via your navigational structure, they're not going to penalise you, but they're not going to be that keen on that content. If you have that content in your sitemap and you have that content in your nav structure, that's the best. That's what you want. That's the best practice, because Google can crawl to it and it sees it's in the sitemap and it raises the authority of those pages overall. But what we've found, and you won't read this anywhere on any Google document, this is just what we've found by working over thousands of sites over the last 10 or so years, is that if you have the content in the Google sitemap, well, I shouldn't say 10 or so years because sitemaps have only been around 6 or 7, and you have it in your nav structure, that's what you want. But you've got to have a Google sitemap in Google Webmaster Tools. You don't want to remove that. You need that, okay? So don't ever, ever do that. It's really important. And if you haven't got a Google sitemap in Google Webmaster Tools, then stop what you're doing right now and go and do it. Really important. And, of course, the final one that we always hear about is people saying, well, what are you doing? We do a lot of stuff. And it doesn't always, like, what are you doing next month? Well, what we're doing next month always depends on how Google reacts to what we do this month. So SEO is a very, you can be proactive about what you're targeting and your content and those sorts of things. But the actual work that you do on a day-to-day basis, and this goes if you're doing internal SEO as well, what you do on a day-to-day basis, you've got to wait and see what Google does based on the changes that you've made and assess Google's response to those changes and then do the next body of work. Hopefully that makes sense. Because if you don't, then you don't know the effect that the work has had. Now, sometimes you might make a change and all of a sudden your rankings drop. Well, you want to go and roll back that last change you just made. If you made that change and then you made another change and then you made another change before you saw what Google was going to do, you don't know which thing that you've changed, which switch that you've thrown has had an effect on your site. So, and these are the things that the three things I guess, well, the sitemap thing was a new one for me actually. I thought, this is an SEO company and they're saying pull your sitemaps. Don't do that, ever. And yeah, the SEO industry is notorious for shonks and backyarders and people wanting to rip you off. I get that. What good SEO is about, though, is becoming a good authority in your field. And I just came from this client this afternoon. She said, we love you guys. I said, we love you. Just great. You can have those conversations, obviously, with a client. And she said, what are we doing next? What are we doing? I said, well, I want to do more video. I want you guys to do more video. And you might say, well, that's not SEO. No, it's not. It's about building the authority of the brand. And that was my conversation with her. I said, we've got to lift the authority of the brand, and the way that we're going to do that, we're doing it with all this great content. We're writing some fantastic blog posts about their niche and about their vertical. I said, but you need to do more video. Let's do a time lapse. And they're in a home improvement area, if you like, construction, that sort of thing. So let's do some time lapse photos. Time lapse photography, it's so hard to set up. I said, not really. I said, you've got iOS now, it's got time lapse. Just go and set an iPhone up or an iPad and just film a day's construction or whatever, and then we can use that because it's great content and people want to share it. So by doing that, guess what happens? Google ranks you higher because you're publishing, you become, so I would say to a large extent, once you've got all the structural stuff happening, don't worry about Google so much then. Just worry about becoming the authority in your marketplace. Your brand has to become the authority in your marketplace. Hopefully that's helpful. Lots of webinars this year. Thanks for all the feedback on last week's, and we'll see you next week. Thanks very much. Bye.